Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hi, friends. I'm so excited about this. I really love being able to bring people onto the podcast who I have a long relationship with, and to get to have this conversation in a structured way that we probably had in an unstructured way so many times. So for those of you who are listening at home, this is Dr. Jenny Hughes. Jenny by day is a trauma psychologist, and she works with other psychologists to navigate especially the challenges of not reciprocal trauma. Tell me what it's called again.
Vicarious trauma.
Vicarious. So she runs the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective. And yes, that's important. And I suspect it might come up in our conversation today. But also, Jenny is a mom and a partner. And in addition to running a business, she is a trained yoga teacher. And that's how we met. We were colleagues and practiced with each other. And then still one of the greatest memories of my life, honestly, was Jenny's wedding.
You're going to make me cry already.
I know. I'm actually almost about to make me cry. It's really funny. You know this. Your wedding was at a really potent, intense time in my life. And it was the first time I realized I could feel joy again.
Yeah.
Riding the carousel of happiness in Nederland, Colorado.
Yeah.
There's some really
because you like have your arms out, right? Like you're like coming by like this and you're hanging off and you're like arms out.
Yeah. No, it's like such a great moment. I just am so grateful that you could take the time to be able to talk about this. So before we dive into the content of it, is there anything that you want to share with people before we start?
I'm so honored to be here with you and to be sharing. Anytime that I get to be with you, to spend time, to talk is always so nourishing. And so I've been looking forward to this. It's been on the calendar for a while.
Yeah.
And I have no agenda or expectations. I'm just here.
Yeah, that's the most spiritual way to begin, probably. No agenda, no expectations. We're just going to be present together.
Exactly.
For a while. So I know a little bit about growing up for you, but specifically from a spiritual or religious context. What was your family like when you were little?
So both of my parents escaped to the mountains of Colorado to go be hippies.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And at the same time, their religious background was Christian in kind of different but similar ways and was still important to them. So my dad's family was Episcopalian, my mom's is Catholic, and I was baptized Episcopalian. And at an Episcopalian church in Boulder. And we, in my early childhood, still attended that church. And I remember, like doing all the stuff there. And then my parents got divorced when I was like 6 or 7 years old and I was in first grade. And when they got divorced, we stopped going to the Episcopalian church because that was like my dad's church. And then my mom, I don't even know how she got connected with it, but there was just there's a couple churches up in Nederland. There's a Catholic church, a Presbyterian, and then there is more of I didn't realize it, but more of like an evangelical church called Calvary Chapel. And so my mom started taking us there. And I remember, I always loved going to church because especially at Calvary Chapel, we like sang fun songs, right? It wasn't like all these hymns and stuff. So they get you. God,
isn't that the truth? It's so funny.
And also, growing up, what I learned from Calvary, the messages that I took away was that they're like, our God is loving, right? Like a benevolent God, right? So I never took away anything about like, we're sinners and we're bad and we need to repent for that. And I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And kind of as I like in my teenage years, I chose to do some different things, which was great for me at that time, but maybe not for my parents.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I didn't regularly go to church as a teenager or even, college or thereafter, really. But I always, anytime that I would come home, especially once I moved away from Colorado, I wanted to go to church at least once. Like I wanted to go and see people, the community. I wanted to sing with people. And also like during grad school, I kind of explored going to church a little bit with a couple different friends. And I don't know if I really fully realized it until maybe meeting you, but and like what you just said was it was the singing. It was like the worship part that I loved and yearned for. Like God, even in grad school, what way before I really got into like a regular yoga practice or any of that side of my spirituality, I would go and we'd start singing. I would just start crying, but it was like it wasn't because I was sad. I was just overcome with this emotion and it like allowed for some kind of a release. And I mean, it's really intense going and going to a church and singing together and worshiping and like I get when people are like, I feel the presence of God because I felt it too. You can feel it in your whole body.
Yeah.
Singing with that many people. And so, yeah, am I moving forward to?
You're doing a great job. Okay. Perfect.
So that was kind of like growing up so we were, always kind of, the church was part of it, but it wasn't mandated per se. And I had overall positive feelings and towards the church and our interactions there, but I never it wasn't something I was regularly doing on my own.
Yeah. And it wasn't, so you weren't forced to do it, but you also didn't I'm curious, and like we might talk about this later, but having been in Nederland, for those of you who are listening, Nederland, Colorado is a magical little mountain town that's like 40 minutes up the hill from Boulder.
Yeah.
Right. And it is, yeah, it's like a little mystical fairyland. But like being up there in the mountains and like with like, it's such deep nature connection. Mm-hmm. Did you have awareness of that when you were growing up? Like how precious that was, or was it just like, it's just home. You don't even think about it.
I definitely took it for granted as a kid. And only realized later, especially once I had moved away, how important that was. I was just talking to some people the other day over like a breakfast, like a work breakfast thing. And they were talking about like going to Colorado or in other places and being in nature and, being afraid of different animals and all of this. And I was like, I've actually never been afraid of like bears or coyotes. Mountain lions were the only ones that we were really, really taught to be afraid of because you can't really do a whole lot. But I was raised of like, this is what you do when you encounter a bear, right? Or a coyote or whatever it might be. And I was never afraid of any of that. And
okay, so complete side note. What do you tell a kid? By the way, if you run into a bear.
And it just was this normal thing that everyone talked about, right? You make yourself really big. You get as big as possible. You get as loud as possible. And you do not run.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah. It's so funny. Like growing up in Louisiana, they teach you what to do about alligators.
Right.
It's like the wildlife.
Yeah. And I also, we were taught, I don't know if this is as true anymore, but that they were more afraid of us than we were of them, and with bears, that's really not true anymore. They just like waltz right in. But yeah. And, we had, In school, every year, a core of our curriculum was outdoor ed, and it was, developmentally appropriate, but it was at least 1 to 2 weeks of our curriculum. I mean, you've been to my house. I don't have neighbors. I literally grew up on the top of a mountain that is in an old abandoned tungsten mine, and like grew up like digging through old mine holes to find random pieces of like kitchen things that people have thrown away to make our little playhouse out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah. I mean, it's really this is just like a plug. We'll be sponsored by like Visit Nederland. Um, but it's extraordinary.
Yeah, and so now I have so much appreciation for that, and my husband and I are working to get our kids there so that they can grow up in nature. But I had no idea. And at the same time, with the religious and spiritual like practices and things I had at church, I think that's part of the context too. Of I didn't realize till later that I went to an evangelical church because they were all just hippies that were doing this evangelical thing in like the 80s and 90s, and so
Right. They were just hippies who wanted better music.
yeah, I really that is actually what it is. Like music was like that was like a really important part of it. And they had a whole band and like toured, and so it was a thing.
Oh, that's so funny. It's like evangelical jam band is kind of
Mhm.
what I have in my
Yep,
head.
with their choir.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like formative time. What you can keep going from grad school, like I don't know, maybe like your yoga discovery is actually really important to this story.
Mhm. Yeah, and truly my yoga discovery started in grad school. I had done yoga a couple times. Like it's so weird. My mom practiced yoga for years, my grandma practiced yoga for years, but they had never like invited me or introduced me to it. And then I did grad school in Santa Barbara, and so like that's, also beautiful and idyllic in its own way. And probably in the last 2 years of grad school, I started to go to yoga. It started more as just like I wanted to go exercise and whatever. And then one of the other grad students in my lab went to a yoga studio in Montecito. And so I started going there. And they had more focus on the breath, on some of the spiritual practices. And I don't know if you know this story. When I found out that I matched in New Orleans for internship, I had just started to get into yoga, and I was like, well, shit, what am I supposed to do now? I really like this studio in Montecito, but I'm not living here anymore. And I asked her, and she was like, oh my God, you're moving to New Orleans? You're so lucky. There's a place there called Wild Lotus, and Sean Johnson is there. She was like, just
Oh,
scrolling.
funny. Well, because people who don't live in New Orleans, especially California, like my experience of yogis in California, they're just like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like Sean. I mean, he sort of is a yoga superstar in my mind, and also like he's just Sean.
Right.
But the band really made contact, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And so this would have been in like 2013.
mm-hmm.
And so then I moved to New Orleans, and I lived like 5 blocks from the Uptown studio, but I didn't go there until a year after I'd moved to New Orleans, actually. And I've thought about this a lot of like, why didn't I go? Part of it was I got a Groupon for some other studio, and I had like a million passes for like $90, and I was a really poor grad student, And I think it
Yeah.
was once that ran out, it was like, all right, well, let me go try Wild Lotus. I can walk there from my house. And I didn't intentionally find the house next to Wild Lotus. And I don't have like a memory of my first class there. I don't know if it was with Sean or I don't know. But yeah, it pretty instantly became my yoga home. And that's where for me, the spiritual practices of yoga really became central and really important for me. And sort of like fast forwarding just for a second, leaving there was so hard, and finding another studio was so hard. And thank goodness I have now. But the way that we practiced at Wild Lotus was just so like the website said, heart-centered, but like whole and comprehensive. And then the community aspect of it, it was just everything.
Yeah, I will forever feel spoiled that,
Mhm.
I, you know, sort of landed in Sean's classes when I was in my early 20s, when I, didn't know anything about yoga. And I just thought all yoga teachers were like this.
Yeah.
And it turns out they aren't, which is
Right.
fine. Um, but yeah, it's a really, and I think regardless of your practice or your teacher or your style of practice, that a yoga studio really is like a home. It's like a
Mhm.
when you find a studio that like the environment feels right for you, the community feel right for you, you find teachers you want to practice with, that having to leave that and find an I mean, I the number of people who like not just when they leave New Orleans, but like when they're moving from city to city, like how hard that can be.
Mhm.
Serious. So I'm so glad that you have a place there.
And now, because the community, the teachers, everything that I've finally found matters so much, I drive like 25 minutes there and back, like both, like each way to go to the studio that I go to now.
You don't get to walk 5 blocks.
Yeah.
And also, right, I think that's true in a lot of bigger cities, but yeah,
Right.
especially in Texas. So part of me is curious too. Like you're in New Orleans. Is it a 4-year residency, 3-year residency?
So internship is just 1 year, but I stayed for postdoc. I became faculty. I mean, I would have still been living there if it wasn't for my husband.
I know. I mean, I would be mad at him except for those cute children. What I think about this often because of the nature of the work that you do, right? What is it like to have, to go to work doing the work that you're doing, right? To like be a trauma psychologist and then at night to be at a yoga studio, right? Like what is there do you feel a connection there? Is it a seems like an obvious question of like how important is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, just earlier this morning, I had a kind of meet and greet with a new colleague, and at the end of it, she was like, I like to really end conversations by asking, "How are you taking care of yourself?" And I was like, "Thank you." And yoga is, the one of the most important ways that I do take care of myself. And it's not just the practice, it's the community, because it is a place, it's that home that I can land in. And, especially when you're known and you have a community at your studio, you arrive, people know you, you get to just be a human. And it's not that I necessarily have a switch that I turn off the trauma psychologist part of myself, but I could just show up however I am, and that's okay.
Yeah, and that I was thinking while you were talking that like there are very few communities in our current world where you can show up and nobody like and people don't know what you do for a living, right? Or they don't
Mhm.
know who you are outside of, maybe in church. I mean, like really like our third places, right? So like a yoga studio makes sense. But what you just named is something that feels like even more special is like you don't have to explain to people who you are or how your day went, but that however you arrive
Mhm.
is acceptable, not just acceptable, but welcome.
Totally, and it's no secret to people who I am or what I do either, and that's part of the beauty of it. And, I mean, there's so many parallels between being a yoga teacher and being a therapist. I mean, when people come into your yoga class, like, chances are someone's gonna be crying on their mat, at some point, right? You are emotionally and physically and spiritually holding space for so many people, and so it also is a communal therapy for myself, and a place where I get to fall apart when I need to, and I don't have to do that alone. Like last year, so my dad died of COVID at the beginning of the pandemic, and I mean, like the the grief anniversaries are just they suck. And for me, it's like this 3-month long process. There's like the months leading up to it, the anticipation of it. Then there's like the day that he died, his birthday was 6 days later, and then there's this like kind of coming down. And so it's just a rough time of the year every year. And this year I was at French Quarter Fest on his birthday, but last year I was in a yoga class, and I've been doing some collaborations with my studio, and so I've taught some like different workshops and things like that. And my teacher was gonna have me like say something at the end of class to promote this thing we were doing, and she didn't know what day it was. But at the end of class and in shavasana, I just lost it, and I just started bawling. And there's only one kind of known person next to me, and she just put her hand out. My teacher was like right at my head, right, and I could just cry, and no one knew why. Like I shared later what happened, like what was happening, but knowing that I have a space where I am allowed to fall apart. I don't have to do it alone because I'm very much like a oldest daughter, independent, right? All the things
Yeah.
is really sacred for me.
Yeah. And I know how many people don't have that space,
Mm-hmm.
and how really transformative. Like I have to constantly remind myself that most people are walking in the world with a mask on, I mean, like an appropriate mask, right?
Right,
But like, sort of changing the persona, like very aware of like what's acceptable, what's not acceptable at work, with their families, with their friends, at church.
right,
So many people are just like they freeze because they have no idea what to do with that. Like the lottery of the way that people respond when you're grieving is so wild. It really feels like a lottery because the people who you would expect to knock it out of the park don't always.
Mm-mm.
And I don't know anybody who's been through that kind of grief process who hasn't been like surprised by the person who showed up and was like, said exactly the right thing, did all of the right things, like was just like really present there.
Totally.
It's such a unique skill.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, like that is just not a place, it's not a skill that we have developed.
Mm-mm.
Not as a It's not a trust that most people have, right? And so there isn't a place for so many people where they can just show up and be exactly who they are
Mm-hmm.
without fear of being, abandoned or rejected or
Right, exactly.
wrong or and I forget it often. Because I have been so lucky, like for the last, 15 years of my life, not just to have one community like that, but to have a number of communities like that, and to get to a point where I'm like, oh, I'm not interested in like squeezing myself back up into that little like zipped up container.
The cat's out of the bag. It's not going back in.
Feels a little bit like putting the toothpaste back in the tube. I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm a little feral now.
I think that's the best way to be.
I mean, yes. So you're still practicing yoga, obviously. Um, I think the world is hard right now in so many ways. The day that we are recording this, there are massive wildfires, right? In Canada, feels like half of the country is blanketed by smoke. At the same time that there's a heat wave, like just the environmental like reality of what's happening is hard enough,
Mm-hmm.
not to mention all of the other realities. Um, so just being a person in the world, I think, is hard enough. You, like many caregivers, right, are at the like I always like all of my friends who are therapists and colleagues. I'm like, are you guys okay? Are you all right? Because like then you're at the epicenter of everybody who's right. And so the work that you are doing specifically in the trauma collective to me, like in Brave Providers, feels like such essential and important work. Because we all know the story, right, of like asking the room full of social workers, like, okay, if somebody needs help, like who wants to help? And everybody raises their hand.
Right.
And like, okay, who of you wants to receive help? And everybody's like, I'm fine. I don't need help. And so part of me just wants to thank you, I think, for doing that work. And I don't want to ask a leading question, but it feels to me like that work is spiritual work. So I want to thank you for that too.
I set out to start Brave to support therapists and to help to educate about vicarious trauma. And through that, I learned about vicarious resilience, which is where I think a huge part of the spiritual piece comes in. And so, vicarious trauma is all the tough stuff that we soak up in any kind of helping and caregiving relationship. And vicarious resilience is all the glimmers and the beautiful stuff. And they cannot exist without each other because their pathways are through empathic engagement, through those channels in our relationships and connections with other humans that open up in those moments. And so you can't say, well, I'm going to shut off the vicarious trauma just so I can get all the good stuff. It doesn't work that way. And at the same time, the vicarious resilience, when I'm on a mission to raise awareness, to teach people about it, because when you know how to identify when it's happening for you, when you can make that real, when you can install it in your brain and body, and then when you can make it even bigger, when you can enhance it by telling other people about it, it is this spiritual practice. It's a communal practice, and it becomes this renewable energy source because it's available in any helping interaction. And even or especially in the ones that look really hard, according to the fly on the wall over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you ask people, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that trauma therapy sounds like the easiest work, right? And I think that there are many people who would walk away from hearing about the worst moments in people's lives.
Totally.
The
Yeah.
most
Why would people
painful,
sign up for hearing that?
the most violence, the most betrayal, the most abuse, like all of the worst things that you can imagine, and now it's worse than that. Um, that they would be like, I don't know, vicarious resilience doesn't sound like enough. Um, and it's interesting because the episode that I just released is about pain and suffering. And it was for a long time I had this like judgmental nature about, about the quality of suffering, right? That like pain, right? That old saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And so like when I'm suffering, then I'm fucking up and I should stop. And I think one of the things that grief really taught me is that that suffering was what softened me into being able to accept help from other people, into being, a little feral, probably, and so like I was like, oh, that I think actually that it's not just the pain that happenings, but it is like the struggle against our pain that it in some ways like opens us up to each other.
Right. And I think that right there is the key because pain can also shut us down from others,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's no way you can control which way it's necessarily going to go. And at the same time, there is some opportunity for intention and choice along the way.
Sure.
But when we get to be with other people while we're also experiencing pain, that I think is one of the most healing opportunities and experiences out there. And that's what I get to do every day as a trauma therapist. That's what any helper or healer does in their role. And as a trauma therapist, before I really understood and had dug into the literature about vicarious resilience, people would ask me, like, how do you do that work every day? And my response was, well, I get to see people get better. Like, we have interventions that work. And I didn't realize what I was describing was vicarious resilience. And vicarious resilience is deeper and more nuanced than that. But it is this gift. Like, I really do get to see people get better. And I get to be with them in those moments when their brain, body, and system is deciding whether they're going to shut down or be with me, let me in, let themselves be seen by me.
Yeah. I feel like selfishly, but also selfishly for our listeners, as a human being walking on the street, it's just like a person moving in the world who has like friends and family and, coworkers. When someone has a really painful experience, right? Maybe that's like um, they've been diagnosed with a very serious illness, or someone very close to them dies suddenly, or right?
Yeah.
How do normal people, what do we do? What is a layperson's, I don't know, from the expert, like what do you do?
So the top two things for me is one, don't shy away from it. Don't pretend like it didn't happen. Don't try to avoid talking about it because that person knows damn well what has happened in their life, right? And it's not that it has to be talked about like forever and ever and ad nauseum, but pretending like everything is okay or like nothing happened is so dysregulating. It's so invalidating. And not that it's intentionally hurtful, but people who have experienced something difficult, they know what happened. And when people pretend like everything's okay, then they have to pretend as well. Right.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so being explicit in your check-ins of like, hey, how are you? Like this is hard. You don't have to talk at all, or you can however much you want to share, but doing your best to let them know that you're a person that they can be with in the experience, and whatever way that looks like. You're not their therapist. You don't have to do therapy with them. And the second is be very explicit in the things that you can do to help. So don't just say, what do you need? Or, hey, reach out if you need anything, because they're not going to. Not just because they're not going to for a lot of reasons, but primarily because they're in survival mode and they're not thinking like, oh, well, Vera could go do this for me, or Jenny could go do that for me, or bring me this. And so it is, hey, I'm going to bring you dinner one night this week. What night is going to be the most helpful? Hey, can I come over and fold some laundry with you? Right? Like, and think about like these really like basic activities that we have to do. You don't have to bring them the world on a platter. It's just literally just hanging out, maybe body doubling. Like, hey, you want to work on our laptops on your couch, whatever it might be. But be very explicit in what you are going to do to help them instead of saying, what can I do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the most, and I stole it. The best line I got after my dad died was, "Hey, what are your dietary restrictions?"
Yeah, totally.
Because that was a question I knew the answer to. If
Yeah.
she had asked me, "I'm going to make you something, what would you like?" I don't have a fucking clue. I
Mhm.
can barely, get up, and like I don't know who I am
Yep.
for the moment. Um but a very specific, clear question, like, what are your dietary, I was like, oh, that's,
Mhm.
and it also felt really nice to be asked a question I knew the answer to,
Yeah,
because
totally.
there were so many other questions I had no answers for. Um,
Food is never going to fail when it comes to supporting people that you love who are going through whatever it is that they're going through in their life. And so if you have no idea what else to do, yeah, ask what are your dietary restrictions and bring food. And also, just like satsang, right? It is then you don't have to stay and eat with them, but it also eating, feeding each other is such an intimate and loving and communal experience. And so it also is a moment of not being alone.
yeah. Yeah. And also like not being alone in a way that doesn't feel like pressure,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
On either direction,
Mhm.
you know?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that little sidebar. I think it falls inside of our spiritual conversation. What inside of all of the work that you're doing, and like as hard as the world is right now, what is a spiritual principle that you come back to when you are feeling unmoored?
Hmm. Well, I guess anything could be a spiritual principle, huh?
There are a lot of them.
Well, I guess I say that because um, the things that I come back to, I don't necessarily on a day-to-day basis define them as being a spiritual principle, but there are certainly things that I come back to regularly that I know are helpful and that help me. And so leaning into community to the best of my ability while also being okay with the moments that I know that I need to just uh, try and do my best to. My kids are 3 and 6, so that's why I say try and do my best to be sort of quiet or let myself recharge on my own. Um, I mean, truly, like community is the absolute most helpful thing for me, and it is a spiritual practice, right?
Yeah.
And, the second is, and God, even like, 10 or so years ago at the beginning of my yoga journey, I would have so rolled my eyes at myself. But the breath, um, uh, if and when I even think about it, but also, especially as a therapist. So I do a lot of somatic work. And so a lot of my sessions are very quiet. I'm not saying a lot. My client is not saying a lot, but we're breathing together. And I can use my breath, even virtually, to regulate and co regulate with them. I can use my breath to communicate things. I can turn on my ujjayi and let them know that I'm breathing and that I am understanding and that I'm following whatever I'm witnessing. And so my breath has become certainly one of those spiritual practices that I return to. And I don't think I ever would have anticipated that.
What I love about that is you answered two questions, and maybe I'll get you get another one, but like you said community, and you didn't just say like I'm over here in the corner breathing by myself. You named the thing that yoga teachers and therapists and all of us like in this world know, but that is like one of the fastest ways to connect and co-regulate with someone is to ground into your own breath and to become aware of their breath. And it's so simple. It's like such a, it seems so simple, like it shouldn't work. You know what I mean?
Totally. Oh, absolutely. I was helping with sometimes I assist a couple brain spotting trainers that I know, and I was helping someone a few months ago, and in learning how to do brain spotting, there's the didactic portion, but then there's practicum, and so you pair up with other people who are there, and you practice and you work on real stuff. And so there was an odd number of attendees, so I was like pairing up with someone so that they had a practice partner, and she was working on some deep stuff, and I noticed that I was starting to sync up with her breath, and I became aware of it, and I had the ability to be aware of it because I was in the therapist role. And then at the end she was like, oh, it was so amazing, I could just like follow your breath and sync up with you. And I was like, girl, I was syncing up with you. And so like, who knows, the chicken or the egg, but we both were doing it.
Yeah, and it's like it becomes like an invisible thread that connects us, right? And yeah, all the yogis will say like, are you breathing or is the breath breathing you? Like we could go down that whole chicken or egg rabbit hole, but yeah, as a way of like building that connection in like such an honest, simple, accessible, like you don't need anything. You
At
don't need any
all.
skills. You don't, I mean, skills, you're already an expert at breathing because you're still here. Um, but yeah, you don't need any training to just pay attention.
Like you said, it's so simple that it seems impossible, right? It seems like there's no way that this could work. And I want to say that's okay. And that's where I meet a lot of my clients. And I do my best to not try and force anything on them and to continue to just be with them and to model for them. And kind of like for myself, over time, there just becomes this almost returning to self because we have to breathe. Like you said, you're already an expert at it. You're still here. And so it's just as that awareness, the shared experiences continue to happen over and over again, it can become a real and valid thing for a lot of people.
Yeah. Is there, I almost don't want to ask this question because I don't want to steal the magic from it. Um, is there research? Do people in the sort of scientific side of this look at what is happening from a nervous system standpoint, like how the breath is, how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. There's tons of research. I'm not super kind of that's not like my area of specialty in terms of knowing the research, but in the literature, people are typically more researching mindfulness, right? That's the scientifically appropriate word for all of these things. And so, yeah, there's so much literature on mindfulness, and mindfulness encompasses paying attention on purpose, your breath, right? Like all of those different things. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. It's so interesting to me. I have another friend who talks about the concept of a collective nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've all experienced that, right? It's like that feeling of like being in church and
Or being
singing
in a yoga class.
or being in a
I
yoga
mean,
class.
during COVID, I like finally got to practice with Wild Lotus again virtually, which was great, but it only lasted for so long. I have never been able to have a solo yoga practice.
Well,
I will not do it.
and I'll tell you as a teacher, teaching that way sucks.
Yeah.
At least the way that I always approach my teaching is that I am not, I mean, maybe I have been practicing a little longer or whatever, but my teaching is also a practice.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, it's like even better than being a student because I can't go anywhere, right? I have to be completely present, completely aware, completely connected
Mm-hmm.
to all of my students for a full hour, sometimes longer. And the gift of that like required presence is pretty extraordinary. And so like when you take away the other beings in the room, the other, breathing in the room, and it's just you and this screen, it's I was of course we were all grateful to be able to like maintain some level of connection.
Yeah.
Um but I also think everybody during that period was really struggling
Mm-hmm.
from
Yeah.
the lack of connection.
Yep. I don't know if you know this, but it was during a one of Sean's virtual classes that Bridget got named.
Really?
It was dark outside still. And he just told the whole story of the goddess Bridget. I was pregnant with her.
You're like,
And I know. Well, and I was like, I was like, oh, I think that's her name, but I don't know if I like it. I don't know. And my mom's family is Irish. And so I was like, well, shit, that's like perfect. And then this was right before my dad died. One of the last things I told him was Bridget's name. And I told Andrew before we had told my dad, and he just immediately was like, yeah, that's her name. And I was like, Ines, are you serious? Who are you talking to?
I love that.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot lately too about the gift of having a like rich and regular spiritual life in the rest of our life. I mean, like what you described about like naming your children is like such a holy moment.
Right.
That there's that. But also just like what happens when we can be available to the wisdom that
Yeah.
is not does not appear logical, right? It does not seem right. Like where did that name come from? I'm not even sure I like it. Um, but
Mhm.
how, yeah, those moments of like really profound insight
Yeah,
that come
exactly.
when I so we talked a little bit already about breath and community. Um, maybe that's all we need.
Mm.
Is there anything else that like feels really nourishing for you in this world right now?
Nature. Yeah.
Yeah. Very different where you are now. But
It is. And, anytime I get to be guided in a visualization of like, go to the place where you feel calm or grounded or whatever, I just instantly transport to the front patio of my parents' house. And there's no other place that my brain goes. And so, like, right at the spot where you married us. And, the view is not of you married us. Although sometimes I go there too.
that's okay. I would not, I would actually, I think I would be a little offended.
You're what? You asked if I realized it growing up, and I said no. And it also is so like just deep in the fiber of who I am that I can really instantly transport myself there. And so I would say that would be the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about both of those things is that it's what I think makes a spiritual truth the most true is like you don't need to talk anymore about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's
Yeah.
like the breath, the end. Like anything that you add to that is unnecessary. And it feels the
Right.
same way. It's like because even if folks who are listening have never been to anywhere in Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you say nature, our imagination, our brain, our spirit goes to a place where we are connected. We are a part of this wild, chaotic,
Mm-hmm.
magical rhythm.
Yep.
And and you don't need to talk.
Yeah, it's the ultimate connection.
Yeah, it really is. What's so funny is that like being down here, the first thing I thought was like, I really, and I've had this thought before, but like, I really need to give people who like fish and hunt like less of a hard time, at least in my brain,
Yeah.
because I do know that that's actually what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like presence, nature,
Mhm.
participating in this rhythm that's happening. My friend, thank you so much. It's such a gift.
Thank you so much.
Do you have I don't know, is there anything else that you want to share with folks? Is there any final thoughts?
Mm. I think it's just to take away what you need from this conversation, to leave the rest, and to get curious about what then happens next.
Man, you just keep saying spiritual stuff all day. When we first got on the phone, you were like, I don't know, I'm just here. I don't have any expectations. It's like, okay, you are the
Well,
leader today.
I learned from the best, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And
Thank
for anyone listening, anytime you get to practice with Vera or have her tell you a story, please take her up on that or sing to you or all of those things all at once because she does them all at the same time.
I have plans to do all of those three things at once sooner rather than later. So, yeah, it's also like one of my favorite things.
Mhm.
Thanks so much, my dear.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.